Hello, how are you?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me, Adrian. I'm so pleased to be here today.
Thank you, Juliana. I love you to pieces for
Oh.
so many different reasons. And I am so super excited to talk about a special event at the end of the podcast. So you're
Yes.
going to have to watch it all because we've got some amazing, amazing topics that we're going to chat about. But I am so incredibly in awe and proud of everything that you're doing. And I
Oh.
see on LinkedIn, Instagram, all the amazing content. So bravo for you. You talk about so many important topics that are near and dear to me. And the one we're chatting about today is a lot of the women's favorite, which is body image, self-love, and self-esteem. So
Yes.
welcome. So for those who don't know you, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Thank you so much, first of all, for having me back. I'm very excited to be here. And my work, it is something that I'd say has beautifully evolved over the last, I'll say, 20 years. But really,
Mm.
the last 10 years, I've been fully dedicated to weight loss, weight management. And what it has translated into nowadays is that I specifically help women in their late 40s all the way to late 60s. And
Mm.
my specialty is on DNA testing. So we can customize that journey for women of hormone balance and all the struggles that we have as we age, combined with human behavior, so that we can know how your body is designed and what to do about it. And then also know how to implement all the things and recommendations that we're learning. So that is the core of what I do.
So interesting. And I keep saying that, oh, we're doing mine, we're doing mine. That is going to be our next podcast. I think that we should film a documentary as long as I don't have to step on the scale, but we'll
No.
talk about that in a second. But I would love to film that because I think what you're doing is so incredibly important. I mean, I know you are so bright, you are so brilliant, but to be able to sort of hone into something that's so important to women.
Yeah.
And, I kind of stopped at 29 and a half, but since I'm not, these topics are so important to be able to sort of own your age, any stage.
Yes.
It doesn't matter because, like you said, from a hormone standpoint, I mean, I know women that have gone through and started perimenopause in their 30s, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so you come in and you sort of say, look, this is what it is because of the DNA. You said something important, and I'm curious. You
Yeah.
can tell our audience, how does human behavior, when you
Yes.
say, and then we talk human behavior, does that mean diet, exercise, stress, things like that? Explain a little bit if
Yeah.
you don't mind.
So, human behavior, the way that I position it is understanding how the mind works, how the minds make choices, and even how we perceive the world, right? So, I'll give a quick example. Say you're driving, somebody cuts you off. So, the perception of that person cutting you off is enough to trigger a whole hormonal cascade. To have the stress hormones raise, your heart beats faster, your pupils dilate. So, we can have an entire physiological response
Mm,
simply from a perspective, right? So if we learn how your body is wired, DNA, and how it functions in terms of the environment, we combine that with how do we see the world, your perspectives and how you shift them to sort of get the best of both worlds, if that makes sense.
that sure does. And so, it's funny that you say about people cutting you off or, driving, because that's such a great example. And, same. And I'm going to say, I think it's an age thing where you sort of let that roll off your shoulder and say, oh, maybe they're having a bad day.
Yeah.
I try really hard, like most humans, not to let stuff like that sort of light me up because it's really, like you
Mhm.
said, it's really depleting.
Yeah.
And so when you work with somebody, you help them to sort of reframe, because you know how I always reframe my
Mhm.
words, rejection is redirection. Do
Yes.
you help them reframe sort of what they're going through so they, or how their perception and their reaction is? Is that what you help people do?
Yeah, so there's kind of like on this specific angle, there's two main things that I would do. The first thing is that, okay, I'll tell you three little pieces. So first of
Yeah,
all, like you can
please.
have the most beautiful DNA code, okay? and I have clients like that, incredible genetics. But stress and inflammation can actually turn off those very good genes. Or you
Mm,
can have like my DNA that's not so hot, and stress and inflammation can really turn on those bad genes, right? So that is the first layer that we have to manage how we see the world, because stress can actually impact from an epigenetic standpoint in DNA. So what I do is that we uncover who are you, because some of us from a mood and behavior, some of us are more prone to feeling our feelings really deep. Others are more prone to getting into that almost hamster wheel loop of, negative thinking.
mm,
Others, like myself, are very intellectual, but we have trouble feeling their emotions in a more somatic way. So we uncover who are you so that you actually understand a lot of those traits based on your genetic makeup. And
mhm.
the human behavior part is, okay, how can we reframe? I'll give you some new frameworks to see life through. And when we talk about self esteem, I can show you one as an example. And having those clear frameworks, we can actually process complex emotions in a quicker and more intellectual way rather than getting everything tangled up and then we just kind of like sometimes sink back into our problems, right? So it's
Right.
understanding who you are and having frameworks to process when life hits you with challenges, essentially.
That's amazing. And you know what? I'm taking this all in and I'm like, can we start right after this podcast? Because, you make it sound so easy. And I think you're sort of untangling what people have been fighting for years.
Yeah.
And people always, and myself included, and I'll tell you my story in a moment, but they make it very complex that it's just
Yes.
about diet or it's just about exercise or it's just about this. And like you said, it is, there's a few important layers like your DNA, any kind of illnesses, obviously human behavior and whatnot. But I
Mhm.
love the fact that you almost simplify it, right? And
Yeah.
it's sort of like, give me what your problems are, let me figure it all out, and then here's the solution. So you're very solution based, which I
Yes.
love. Right? No, but it's
Yes.
true because
Yeah.
you talk about, let's talk about weight. My lovely friend Chris and I, we did a podcast and we talked about weight and how people will comment on other people's looks. And as women, I hate to say it, so I'll just tell you very quickly.
Mhm.
I modeled back in the day, and I swear I think I was maybe
Nice.
95 pounds. But I was
Oh, wow.
considered fat. No, but I was considered fat, and I was called fat for many. And I know you're not even supposed to use the F word, but I'm just saying that's what I was called. That was my experience. And I remember being in at the Toronto Zoo, and I was like, the backdrop was a bunch of these gorillas, and the photographers were sort of laughing and kind of whatever. And okay, I was already uncomfortable. I think I was maybe 17, and
Oh, wow.
they're like, "Oh, the gorillas have better bodies than you do," and da da da, da like real body
Wow.
shaming. And even though I was kind of like, I left, of course, and in tears, but I didn't let them see me cry. But I
Mhm.
left in tears, and I realized, like, uncovering like doing my own work, that really did affect me. And so
Yeah.
now I'm in a very different place. Like, and it's maybe not a good place. You and I will uncover all that afterwards on camera. But I really don't care if people, like my husband will say, "Oh my God, you look so good." I hate to say it, it doesn't affect me. Or
Yeah.
people will say, "Well, you look good for having 4 kids." It's like, why do you got to say that, right? Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I really hurt my back, probably about, 16 years ago. And
Mhm.
so talk about, sort of yo-yo where I'm not as being able to be as physically fit. And
Yeah.
I've learned that I do gain like 5 to 10 pounds. Stress, big issue.
Yeah.
And like you said, I love that because it's not just about what you eat and all the workout you do. But we're going to touch base on that in a moment. So
Mhm.
much so that, as I had 4 kids, I'd walk by the mirror. And I'm not embarrassed to say this because I know a lot of other women have experienced this. And I'd be like, "Oh, you got a muffin top. Oh, you're kind of, oh,
Mhm.
And I made myself say it out loud. And my kids are like, "Mom, are you okay? Like, why are you talking to yourself?" I was so mean to myself that I
Yeah.
took every single mirror out of my house. This was a few decades ago. I took
Mhm.
every single mirror out of my house until I learned how to be nice to myself. So let me tell you, I had a mirror
Yes.
this big to put on makeup and do hair, but I did not want that negativity in my life. And
Yeah.
still to this day, it's just like, if you say anything nice or negative, thank you for the compliment or thank you for the insult. Those are your feelings to have.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to, there's so many women that really struggle with body image. What
Yeah.
is your sort of best advice to them? Like, what would you say if you had a young Adrian client at the time? Something similar to that. What would you do?
Yeah, it's this is such a topic I love so deeply because it kind of like combines a lot of different important pieces, right?
Mm,
So the first piece I would say is that we are as women bombarded for such a young age with how things should look like, and the standards are usually unachievable, right? I
mm,
think I wrote in one of the articles for your magazine that I had very different standards of beauty in my up to my early 20s because I lived in Brazil, a country
mm,
with different beauty standards, then coming to Canada, and then everything I ever worked towards changed. And I'm like,
hmm.
huh. So
You're like,
that
well, that
it's
didn't
like,
work out so
okay,
good.
that's easier now.
Yeah.
Right? But I thought, okay, so this was a great aha moment for me that
Mm,
it's literally this, I would say, illogical set of rules, right? That we all sort of strive towards. And when I understood that, it's like, okay, but that did not mean that it changed my desire to achieve it, right? Like I just now I wanted to achieve the new one. So I thought, okay, this is really rooted deep inside of me. So then I took a step back and said, is this a self-esteem issue? Is this a self-worth issue? Because I think all those topics get really mixed in, right, when it comes to
sure.
body image. So I'm going to give you my framework for looking at this,
Please.
that it really simplifies to me that if since this is visual, I'm going to use my hands. So if you imagine like a x and y axis crossing here, right in the middle, this like medial line is what I call self-worth, and that is always stuck at 100%. It doesn't matter who you are, where you were born, what you put in your mouth, what you do and don't do. It is always 100% because that is everybody intrinsic value is always at 100. What changes is the vertical line is your perception of that worth.
Mm,
And that's what I call self esteem, right? So if you're above the line, you're proud, you're happy with yourself. And if you're below the line, we may be in a bit of guilt and shame and all those things. But either state of being really proud or really, you know, deeply humbled or ashamed is not a balanced state of perception. You're either above or below that mean, right? And I feel that the best way to have the healthiest body image of self is getting as close to the medial line as possible by neutralizing those misperceptions that we
mm.
accumulated over time. So that's like kind of like the big picture, how I look at that topic.
That's perfect. And I love the fact that you talk with your hands because being European, I'm constantly like this.
Yes.
I'm being told to like, I'm always going to talk with my hands. So I love that. And it's a great visual. And you're right. I mean, look, life is always about balance. It's not about self-indulgence and whatnot. But,
Yeah.
even people with rock star confidence, like, I think that sometimes it's not always exactly balanced. I mean, there's times,
Yeah.
that I feel, and again, I always say this, and people are like, well, yes, they are. This is how I feel. Somebody very smart once told me feelings are not facts. Just because you
Yes.
feel a certain way, I feel bloated, I feel like I look like this, I feel, whatever. They're not facts. And, even sometimes now, and again, I'm talking from my experience because I don't want to, I know many women, and I know you do as well, that struggle with this or have achieved greatness and have achieved balance and 100% happiness, and 100%
Yeah.
balance. But I don't know if there is. I'm going to sort of challenge you on that
Yeah.
and say, is there ever 100% balance? Because, like I said, there's times I feel within myself that I feel very confident about certain things. And then, everybody is allowed to have a crappy day and everybody's allowed to
Exactly.
have something where, okay, maybe you ate something salty, maybe, you weren't 100% or maybe you were 90% on your diet and, you slipped a little bit and you can feel your pants are kind of tight. Like it's
Yeah.
funny. I have like 3 sets of clothing. I used to have five where it's like this size, this size, this size. And I know if I get to this size, that's a problem, right?
Right.
And so it's ridiculous because do you feel that people, that women because the women that I've talked to, almost
Mhm.
100% of women have a problem with the scale.
Yes. So in my work, we don't use it. I actually call it the beyond the scale markers. We don't use it. Like if people are really attached to it, like sometimes it takes a little bit for them to break up with the scale, right?
Who's
Uh,
really attached to it? I've had this anyways. Again, this is not about me, but I know so many women that have had a horrendous relationship with the scale. Okay, go
yeah.
ahead. I'm still like doing the happy dance that you said
And
forget it.
and the scale doesn't even, it's not the best or even the most objective measure of health, right?
Mm,
And I think especially the women that I work with, like I don't work with women in their 20s and 30s just trying to get really fit. Like I work with women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that want to be healthy and live as beautiful a life as they can. So the values and the goals that we have are a way more health focused than
mm.
size focused, if that makes sense.
It sure
Um,
does. It sure
yeah,
does. I
so
just
we
was
don't
more
use it.
talking about, sorry to cut, I think we
Yeah.
lagged. I didn't mean to cut you off. I think I was more just talking about like there are women that are really not loving the scale. And
Yeah.
so I love the fact that you're like break up. So for any woman that has ever even thought that you could break up with a scale,
Yes.
as of today, as per Juliana, we get to break up with the scale. I love that. And you're right. It's not about size, but I feel that, you know, we can measure it in many different ways. You're
Mhm.
right. DNA, blood work, probably the two great markers. How we feel, energy level. Like
Yes,
I really kind of
exactly.
base it. I got to be honest. And maybe when we do our work, I can get out of the size thing. But I know I'm comfortable at a certain size. That's when I
Yeah.
feel healthiest. That's when I have
Yeah.
like the most energy. So I feel like my thing about not going on the scale, then I can do the close thing where it's like, okay, well, if
Hmm.
this
Yeah.
doesn't close or so it's just another marker. But you're saying, oh
Yeah.
wait, there's so much more, and I love that
Yeah.
because it's you're giving information which is so valuable.
And when the information is truly customized to how your body is built, like the level of results you get is significantly better because we can cut through all the trial and error, all the that's why I don't have any specific diet trends I'm attached to or supplements that I sell regularly. Like I leave myself completely open to customize to who you are. And what I find it really fascinating, I was just talking about this in another interview recently, that even though I have a very specific niche, right? Women in a specific age demographic, mostly looking for hormonal and or weight management, genetically speaking, I have women in extreme opposite sides, right?
Mm,
Which is a beautiful thing. So even in my very niche lane, I'm customizing things dramatically, right? And I think that is really exciting to me because otherwise, maybe 20% of women would get results rather than some of the case studies that I have because women are actually getting something tailored to their health needs and goals, right? So I think
yeah.
that's the beauty of it. We take it down. Like I'll use myself as an example briefly. So I would say I was for the last 2 years, decently healthy compared to my spinal surgery. And, I
Yeah.
have healed from 15 years of chronic migraines, like several per week. It was a pretty, dire time in my life back in
Mm,
2017. But the last 30 pounds that I released, I attributed solely to inflammation in my body, and that's it. And with
wow.
the inflammation coming down and the weight melting away, my chronic pain also went with it, right? Which was
Mm,
for me the ultimate goal. I was happy where I was weight wise, and I'm like, this feels even better, right?
yeah,
Um, but
exactly.
I was working with my DNA for inflammation in particular, and then the extra weight loss for me was really like a bonus, I would say. Yeah.
Yes, and so so many people say the same thing as sort of what you're saying, but you just take it so much further by customizing that
Hmm.
plan for people. And when I
Yeah.
say people say the same thing, I'm referring to weight is typically a byproduct or a
Yes.
something of a bigger picture, right? Which is
Yes.
why the DNA is so important. And
Yeah.
whether, like you said, it is a serious surgery or illness and whatnot, the weight is just sort of your body saying, hey, something's wrong. Like, not saying look in the mirror, but look in the mirror. This is not who you are, not who you
Hmm.
are made to be. And so the fact, and I know I've been watching your weight loss journey, which obviously happens sort of very organically because you've been
Yeah,
doing this work. And I love and applaud you for, I think it just goes back to saying that there is a science behind it, first
definitely.
and foremost. And it's not always, you know, I don't know. What do you think about the calories in, calories out? I don't think you can eat 5,000 calories and expect to, be at your optimal weight. I think, you still have to, it's very simple where, not simple, but, calories in, calories out, what type of calories and everything. But what you're saying
Hmm.
is your body might be holding on to something for a different reason. Am I correct
Yeah.
in saying that?
100% correct. And even like the calories out part of that equation is actually trickier than most people understand. I've been talking more about that topic recently.
Explain, yeah. Explain,
um,
explain, because I'm taking notes. Tell me.
yes. So there's more and more research coming that technically you know how heart, for example, your heart rate is controlled without your conscious decision. You don't think here, okay, how many beats per minute, right? Like it just happens. There's all these body processes that are controlled by a force beyond our conscious mind. And for a very long time, people were led to believe that how much energy you expend, meaning the calories out part,
Yep.
was controlled through more fitness and exercise, and that is incorrect. So there's a
Mm.
group that studies energy balance deeply, Dr. Ponter's lab, and he actually went to Tanzania in Africa, and he stayed there with like one of the I'll say last tribal communities, human gatherers, like that are literally hunting for their food to this day. Okay.
Wow.
So you're talking
Wow.
about legit, as close to ancestral living as you can get. And he compared how much energy they expend versus somebody sitting in Chicago in their office for 8 hours ordering Uber Eats. Okay. Those two
Mm.
extremes. And he said that at the end of the day, on average, the amount of energy expenditure by both groups was not very different, which is shocking.
What?
You think, how is this possible? So, yes, you burn calories through exercise, but because the body is trying to control how much calories we expend, the calories out each day, it actually conserves energy. So, for example, it spends less on your immune system, it spends less on reproduction. So, the net
Mm.
net is about the same. So, I tell
Wow.
women,
So
it shocks
interesting.
women. Like if you burn calories at the gym, then you go eat an ice cream because you thought, oh, just burn 100, I'm going to eat 100. You are going to gain weight because you're going to throw off that balance equation because we cannot mess up our biology. Like we don't have that much control over how
Yeah.
much energy we expend in total per day. Yeah.
That is so interesting. I
Mm.
mean, I have so many questions, forget about body image questions, but
Yes.
that is so interesting. So, one thing, piece of science I do know is that, and you can say, yes, it's true, or no, it's being challenged, but it has to do with the fact that, let's just say, for example, I am supposed to be eating 1,400 calories and I've got an event and I've got to, cut some weight, and
Mhm.
here we go. And I'm down to, let's say, 900 or 1,000 calories a day. People think, oh, instant weight loss. For me, I'm confused because I'm like, why am I gaining weight? And so what I
Mhm.
learned was, well, your body thinks it's starving. Like your body
Yeah.
doesn't have a brain per se. And so it's holding on to all the calories because it doesn't think it's going to get any more. So like you talk about balance, is that a myth,
Mhm.
truth, fact? What do you think
No,
about that?
not a myth. And I would say the very low calorie diets, like earlier in life, metabolically may be possible. Like maybe somebody like, bodybuilding, like I said, cutting for like shows and stuff. That's a bit different when we have
Okay.
a different hormonal makeup as we get into our 40s, 50s, and beyond. But also, I would say that even if you're really cutting down those calories, the composition of those 900 calories will matter because if you were to bring it to that level, which is almost like, definitely crash diet territory for a short time, if your protein is too high, at least based on some research in fast mimicking diets, which yes, you can probably drop like 8 to 10 pounds and then regain maybe 5, 6, 7 of that once you refeed again. But for that period, if you were to, for say 5 days, try to really bring it down for an event, if your protein is too high, as per the research, it shows that you don't get the body into this really detoxifying
Mm,
autophagy level, so you don't see the weight loss, right?
yeah.
So it's not just the calorie, but it's the composition of the nutrients that are making up those 900 calories in this example. Yeah.
I love that. And so now what I do, and I'm going to ask for some tips and tricks and see if you have anything. So let's just say your people are wanting to go to an event. And again, I'm talking this was years ago. Now I just, drink extra water, eat more berries, just make different food choices. I'm still,
Mhm.
you know what? And you're probably going to say, I don't know if it's a good idea or not. I'm still sort of a low carb girl just because it just doesn't sit well with me. So,
Mhm.
what would you say would be sort of three or four of your top, let's say, food choices or even categories for women that do really want to have a healthy gut? And when I talk about gut, I
Mhm.
suffered and I still have flare ups of IBS, which could be a food allergy, could be many different things that you and I
Yeah.
will definitely get into the weeds about. But I find that carbs and heavy foods don't sit well with me. I find I don't know why, but berries, certain things that are very sort of bland and palatable in my stomach are much easier. What
Yeah.
would you say would be sort of some go-to foods that women that maybe have a sensitive gut would want to go to?
Yeah. So go to or avoid, like which
So I would
direction?
say go to. Sorry, I know I'm sort of saying what
Yeah,
I
no.
can eat and can't eat, but I would say, what do you, okay, so it's kind of a three-pronged question here. So what do you think about the low carb? And then what would be your sort of go-to food, say for even just for yourself personally,
Yeah,
and sort of advice that you may pass on to somebody?
absolutely. So in terms of the low carb first, so I have been in that field of serving clients and also personally for myself for
Mm.
a very long time now. However, I do low carb differently than most people out there, and I because I recognize that a lot of the women that I work with also have a lot of mood issues, and going too low on the carbs could actually be, I'll say, detrimental to that specific demographic. So I
Right.
do work with what I call like healthy carbs, and we really
Yes.
pair that genetically depending on how much you can handle because your DNA can answer that for us. So for healthy carbs, I actually eliminate things like the grains, not just because of carb
Mm.
content, but also a lot of pesticides used in grain production. I find it's a
Wow.
very difficult fiber source for women to digest. So I do more things in the lines of like your sweet potatoes, your squashes, and kind of like
Quinoa?
play like quinoa. Some women have trouble with, others are fine
Okay.
with. So like even the lentils, the legumes, like it would depend a little bit of who you are in terms of whether or not that is the best choice for you. But that would be like
Interesting.
in, I would say, decent moderation for the low carb, but not extra low carb. There's very few women
No,
that
and
ever put in an extra low carb. Yeah.
and yes, and that's the same. I actually have to have carbs every day, but like you said, I try to stay away from the white. I'll do more whole grains, organic, and like you said, sweet potatoes and some of your choices I think are
Yeah.
fantastic. And so, what would be your go-to foods? Would you say what would be a
Yeah.
couple for yourself, or say ones that you typically, and I know there's exceptions, but typically would refer to
Yeah.
clients?
I would say so. This is a very big question, right? Because there's my mind is going in a million directions, but I'm trying
I
to find
know.
like what
I'm
is the most.
sorry. I'm trying to
No,
give.
no, that's okay. I'm trying to like what is the most helpful thing I can share, right? So I would say from a protein standpoint, maybe like since we talk carbs, like from a protein standpoint, and we can talk fast, and we can maybe keep it the three big micronutrients
Sure.
then. From a protein standpoint, this is probably the one area that I'm the most passionate because that's the one that I saw the most relief in inflammation for myself. And that has really been going towards proteins that the processing happens in my kitchen, right? So for
Mm,
example, if I'm eating a good quality piece of meat or, a good quality piece of fish and I'm the one preparing that, I feel that is the most, I would say available low inflammatory type of protein versus if we're trying to just hit the numbers and eating, say, pea protein powder with lots of additives and stuff, because peas have protein, but it's not a protein source. It's a carb source, a fiber source, a protein source. So anytime that there's too much processing in things such as proteins, I see a lot of women having difficulty digesting it. But when you bring it back to real food that you process in your kitchen by cooking, we see incredible transformation. So I would say that would be a big category for me, is that I shift everybody's protein to real foods.
Love that.
Yeah. And the final is fats. And I do want to mention that because I think from like a gut and inflammation, that could be really life changing for women. And just being very careful, because fat can be really health promoting, but also very inflammatory. And the two ways that I like to think of it, genetically, we can see how much saturated fat your body can actually process and tolerate before weight gain gets triggered, right? So we have specific ranges there, which goes anywhere from like 20 grams all the way to infinity. So it really is customized to your DNA. But what everybody can do, even if they never get tested, is removing those highly inflammatory fats. I spent 7 years in sort of the food processing side in my corporate years, and we've done a lot of work with fats and oils and oxidation. And what most people don't know is that if you get something like canola oil, that's that beautiful, clear golden, it is refined, it is bleached for the color, and deodorized, so you cannot smell rancidity. Those are chemicals on chemicals on chemicals, and that stuff goes into your bodies, right? So I
Yeah.
say if you want to tackle fats, the first thing to do is to go away from those refined sort of seed and vegetable oils and going back to more vintage fats. For example, like butter or duck fat or even coconut oil. That's not quite a vintage fat, but it's for some women that works for them. And staying in those lanes in terms of making your food choices as close to real food as possible, that's usually the way to go.
I
That was a
love
long
that.
answer.
So all I hear is no scale and I get my butter back. And
Get
it's
your
so
butter
funny
back.
because it's true, for years everybody was like, "Oh, the healthy choice is margarine or the
Mm,
healthy choice is
yes.
canola oil." And now it's interesting you say seed oil. You are about the fifth or sixth professional that I love to listen to that said the same about seed oil. Now, what about, because people were always like really big on, like, let's say olive oil or grapeseed oil. You're saying no to those as well because they're also heavily processed?
So olive oil is different. Grapeseed oil, I group with the seed and vegetable oils. Olive oil is different. However, olive oil can be, I'll say, very easily compromised. Maybe,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right word, but it can be, blended with other oils, like especially the
Mm,
lower price point ones. But if you're talking about high quality olive oil in the amber bottle, because olive oil has a higher peroxide value, so it oxidizes very quickly with light and exposure to elements. But if you treat it properly, if it's an amber bottle, olive oil can be a very excellent fat source
I love that.
with
Love
your
that.
butter.
Yes, exactly. So, and I know that we only have a few more minutes, but I really want to talk to you very quickly about self-esteem.
Yes.
So, when you think about self-esteem, when most people think about self-esteem, we think about, maybe how you feel, how you're looking fine or not feeling great or whatever. But for me, sort of self esteem is something that I hold within myself. It's not what you can tell me, it's not
Yes.
how they make me feel, comments, followers, whatever the case is. Self esteem is the belief I have within myself. What would you say that sort of
Yeah.
self esteem would be? Because then
Yeah.
I just also want to say, because then I get to control it. Outside influences,
Exactly.
fashion, weight, none of that ever plays a part in it. So, what do you feel that that would be to you?
Yeah. So for me, like the way I love to look at this topic is, and this is like a belief system that needs to be in place before what I'm going to say next makes sense. The belief system is nothing is ever missing. Okay. That's the belief system. So when we talked about that, horizontal vertical line and self esteem being the, say, the perception of your worth, right?
Yes.
perception is in relation to a point, right? So you cannot compare without having a point of comparison. So when we talk about self esteem, if you feel low self esteem, it's because you're putting the point of comparison above yourself, right? So what
Ooh.
I like to do is tell women if nothing is ever missing, if you can believe that belief system, right?
Mhm.
If I look at you, hypothetically, I'm going to use myself and you as an example. I look at you and I say, let's just say that I feel less self esteem in terms of my ability to speak in big stages, okay? Because I know you're amazing at it. So, what I ask myself, if I perceive this, you're my vantage point above where I am, I say, what do I see in Adrian that I admire that I have it too? And then I go
Ooh.
look and find it in myself. And then we equilibrate the mind, and we're no longer, oh, I'm not as good as, I'm just differently good at something,
That
right?
is amazing.
What I talk about in my book specifically is what about a trait that you cannot change. So let's just say somebody's having a lot of hair loss and somebody has like J-Lo, like beautiful hair, even may or may
Love
not
her.
real hair, doesn't matter, but beautiful, luscious hair, right?
Yeah.
How do you compare to that, right? Because you can't just like magically grow hair overnight. So I say, okay, so if the J-Lo is the point of reference above where you perceive yourself to be, to neutralize that self-esteem scale is asking, what does the hair mean to you? Is it,
Mm.
it means it's sexy? Is it like, I don't know, status? Is it a sign of wealth? And whatever the meaning is, that's what the gap is. You look in your life, where in your life does that already exist in you? And it may be in a completely different area of life. Maybe your ability to handle your kids at home or your career
Mhm.
may have nothing to do with hair. But the concept is we can always equilibrate our perceptions of our self esteem by remembering that nothing is ever missing. So, whatever we see in somebody else that makes us feel less than, once you find that version in you, we go back to equilibrium and we move on.
Wow.
That's
You
how I
make it
look at
sound,
that
I
topic.
love that. You make it sound so simple, and I know it's not, but I think when you break it down for people like that, it makes sense. And that's when I say you make it sound that it's achievable and attainable. And
Yeah.
that's what I think people need to sort of hang on to, that no matter what you do, and I love the fact that you say really like look inside yourself, because
Yeah.
that is where the answers are, right?
Exactly. And if
And
nothing is missing, then you cannot be missing. So if you already come to the equation, okay, I cannot be less than someone else. It's not possible. So let me find where I also have it. So it becomes a more empowered search rather than
yes.
trying to prove we're not less than, right? I'd rather prove how good we also are. That's more like an
And
empowered perspective.
exactly. And even that I have the private investigation agency. When
Hmm.
people come to me, they're searching for the truth. So let's just use
Yeah.
infidelity, for example.
Yes.
They're really not coming for those answers. They're coming to find the truth, but then what they end up with is the truth about themselves, which I find so
Yeah.
beautiful, because this really is a journey, right?
It
And
truly
our
is.
journey is within ourselves. Yes, you have amazing partners and friends and family along the way, but the relationship you have within yourself, I think, is the most important one. And I know you feel the same way, which is
Yes.
one of the many reasons I love and respect you. And which, if you look at sort of my story about the mirror, I realize like you are not, like, you would never speak to a human being that way. Why
Yes.
are you talking to yourself that way? I
Yeah.
think that comes with maturity. I think it comes with, like you said, your aha moments. I think that
Hmm.
comes to people at a certain time of their life, pivotal or whatnot. But I love the fact that you're teaching people, look, you don't need to be unhappy for the next 25 years. I can tell you what you're not pleased with. I can help you
Yeah.
balance your internal feelings and whatnot, and have you empowered that way. And so when we talk about body image, when we talk about self esteem, and even confidence, it really is, something internal and unique to all of us. Would you
Yeah.
agree with that?
100%. And I think what we can do with the type of work we're discussing today is take so much the self blame away, right? Because I
Mm.
think the self blame is something we need to unlearn, to be honest, because we've been taught for so many years. It's not about, it's funny because I live my life based on the principles of taking 100% responsibility for all things that I perceive, my perceptions, but zero blame over them, if that makes sense, right?
That
um,
I if everybody could think that way, we would live in a very different world. I think you
yeah,
don't think that's a great way to live because
yeah,
the second you take 100% ownership, that gives you control. That gives you
exactly.
control to change, to
Yes,
shift, to move, to whatever. And even the work that I know you've done and definitely I've done with Agnes even,
yes.
you realize it's like, oh damn, do I still feel that way? And Agnes is like, yeah, no, you don't need to be feeling like that. And sometimes it's putting ourselves in with those people that are like-minded
Yeah.
and that are able to sort of I talk a lot about and, oh, we have like only 5 minutes. We've got this special thing we have to talk
Yes.
about, but I talk a lot about looking in the mirror, and it is a difficult thing for us to do sometimes, to look in the mirror. And I'm not talking about body image, although it is that for some people, but looking in the mirror and seeing past body and looking within thyself is the
Yeah.
most powerful thing any of us can do work wise. And
Yeah.
if it's somebody like yourself, like Agnes, like myself, mindfulness, whatever therapy, doesn't matter how you do it, but looking within yourself. I love your message that I am accountable for 100% of me is
Yeah.
beautiful.
And I know we were tight for time, but I'll just add one final thing here, which
Yes, no, I've
so
got
this
time.
so this 100% taking responsibility is exactly this mirror effect you just said. So the way that I look at it is that anything that I perceive that I really like and admire, people that I feel, oh, they're so good to me, those are people reflecting back parts of me that I love and accept already. The people that bother me, get under my skin, that really challenge me are the people mirroring back to me the parts of me that I don't yet love and accept. So
Mm,
the 100% responsibility is that I'm the one looking at the mirror at all times, right? So back to our driving example, somebody cuts me off and I think they are inconsiderate, right? I immediately pause. I'm human, right? I'll have the thought. And then I pause,
yeah.
like, when was I inconsiderate? And I, was not loving the part of myself. And I think about situations like, yeah, you know what? I've done it too. And then it neutralizes it. And I'm no longer mad at the person for doing this one time, one thing, because we all have all the traits at different times, right? And I use
Right.
this mirroring effect as how I clean my own side of the street and come to relationships from as open and clean place as I possibly know how at that moment in time. Yeah.
I love you've got such authenticity. And I talk a lot about being authentic and being vulnerable. For
Yeah.
us to even be able to have these open conversations are so beautiful because somebody watching this podcast, it's going to change somebody's life. And I think that's
Yeah,
a big part of why both you and I are doing all of this.
definitely.
And God bless you for the fact that, you've done all this work. Like you said, you've really honed into something that is so incredibly important to so many women and so many humans, actually. And you're able to come up with a solution. So big love to you for that.
Thank
And
you.
now you are taking it one step. And so this podcast, I feel, will be one of many series we're going to do. I know you and I and a
Yes.
few other special guests are going to do something live together. Can't wait for that. But you are taking things so many steps further. And like I said, I love you to pieces, and I'm so very, very proud of you.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your event that you have coming up. I am
Yes.
thrilled.
So excited. So you are our keynote speaker, which I'm deeply honored and grateful for. And the event is called Leader Inspired. And it's so beautiful that you brought this mirror thing right now because it's the perfect segue to the event. That my co host Kimberly Snyder and myself had this desire for a very long time to do something like this. So, this is like her dream come true. 4 years hiatus because of the pandemic. We're back in person
We're
with events.
back.
And the goal is that we believe that women, when we put a lot of powerful women in one room, we almost like neutralize, not neutralize, we normalize the idea that women are awesome. because when you see a lot of awesomeness, you feel comfortable owning your awesomeness or your rock star status, like you say.
Yeah.
And our concept is this mirror idea that you come in as a leader, inspired leader, and you leave a leader inspired. And it's very much we're all mirrors to each other's brilliance and expertise. And through community and story sharing, we can really lift everybody up, right? So that's very much what the idea is. And the event in particular is looking at the mind body business connection, in which we want to show that you can have the best of both worlds and have amazing careers, beautiful businesses, and do big things in the world without having to compromise your health. And that's very much what we're hoping to bring with all our speakers and special activities we have planned.
Oh, absolutely. And I know you told me a little secret, which we're going to talk about at another time. I
Yes.
know that we are going to somehow put that on social at
Yes.
some point, and I'm so excited. And thank you so much to you and to Kimberly for having me as your keynote. I am thrilled.
Yes.
And I also want to add a few things to just what you said in closing. I feel that when you put a bunch of women together like what you're doing, and I'm not talking about the keynotes, your keynotes and the ladies, obviously I've seen the gals that you have speaking, yourself, Kimberly, Agnes, and help me with the other gal's
Julie.
name.
Julie
Yes,
Cohen. Yeah.
Julie, it's going to be fun. It's going to be inspiring, motivating. But for me, what really lights me up is talking to and hearing the people who are there and being able to interact with them and their
Yeah.
stories and their takeaways and being able to have them, like you said, leave as an inspired leader because of what they've experienced. And it's
Yeah.
sort of a trickle down effect
It
because
is.
then they're going to go out and inspire other people as well. So big
Exactly.
love and kudos to you
Yeah.
and to Kimberly and to all the amazing women that will be there and will be on your panel. It's going to be fantastic.
It
So I can't wait.
will.
Thank you.
My
Big,
pleasure.
big love to you. Thank you for your time again.
Yes.
And we are going to continue lots of fun conversations. I'm going to include everything in the bio where people can reach out to you and whatnot. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yes. Thank you so much again for hosting. It was such a beautiful conversation, and I cannot wait to have you speak at the event.
Thank you. Big love. We'll talk to you soon.